Welcome, everyone, to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, I am very excited about today's podcast. Honestly, this is going to be a good one that you're probably going to want to save and listen to several times over because I have two amazing astrologers, Shannon Takacs and Kitty Foss, here with me to talk about what we're going to be seeing in 2025 astrologically and how that will play into some of our experiences, both collective and individual. However, what's really interesting is we're already feeling this energy now, and we're feeling this energy now because Mars is retrograde already, which is leading into the new year. So it's not like we're just waiting for this energy to start come 2025. We're actually already in it. And I think today's podcast is going to help us kind of get a lay of the land so we can better navigate it as we move through. So I'm very excited. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Thanks for
Thank you.
having us.
Thank you very
Always
much. Nice
fun.
to be here again.
Yeah.
So nice to have you both. So, um, yeah, let's dive in. So, Shannon, do you want to start us off a little bit with Mars retrograde? What is Mars about, and why does that matter? Like, why is that leading us in?
Yeah. Why does it matter and why should we lead into it? Well, we should lead into it because it's happening real time right now. I think it started. When did it start, Kitty?
6th of December.
Yeah, like just a few days ago.
hmm
On top of a Mercury retrograde, but we won't go there because, Mercury gets a bad rap. And we're just going to stick with Mars because, let's just give Mars some light. Why should we care about it? Because for two reasons. Mars is how we move through the world. So it's our action planet. So in our personal charts, we have Mars in our chart. And if you know how to look at your chart, you can see where it is in your specific chart, but it is how we move through the world. What do we do with anger? It's also about our sexuality and our expression, right? So it's and it wants to be bold. It is, well, it doesn't necessarily want to be bold. It just is bold because it's Mars. Um, and the interesting thing about this retrograde is that it started in Leo. So it was in Leo, and then it's going backwards, but it doesn't go backwards. We've all learned this through social, maybe, but it's going to retrograde into another sign. So it's leaving Leo, where it starts its retrograde, and it's going back into Cancer, where it will hang out for a little bit before it will then go back into Leo and carry on with the dance. And I just find it interesting when there's Mars retrograde. We had one a couple summers ago, did we not, Kitty? Was it this year? At the time is
It
such
it
a
was
trip.
it was back and it was for 7 months in the same sign. It was in Gemini, which is
Oh,
unusual
yeah.
to stay
Oh,
in one sign like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it's significant because it's how we move through the world. And when we're getting stalled out, like it's literally like a little bit of a "Whoa." So if we're feeling a little bit stalled out, stuck, not sure, we can use all the same words like a Mercury retrograde. Like, let's just relook at this. Let's revisit this. What's happening here? And what's it happening to? And what's it trying to get my attention in? That kind of thing. So I don't know. Kitty, do you want to jump in and
Yeah, in Leo, Mars pretty kind of happy. Mars likes what makes us roar, how we're on stage, how we align who we are,
Mars
our
and Leo
energy.
over here?
Mars, well, and I'm Mars and Cancer. And when
Oh,
and
that's
when it
so
yeah, and when it
interesting.
dips
interesting.
back into Cancer, it takes this Leo energy and it pivots with it. Now, what do I do with it? Mars is not as happy in Cancer at all. Um, and what's really interesting to me is that this is Aries energy. This is that
Yeah.
spark. This is that what starts us forward. And we're dealing next year with two, and it's the first cycle of everything, two planets starting a brand new cycle. One will be a 165-year cycle and one will be an 84-year cycle. So we'll be dealing with this Aries energy. So I do think this is a real preview of this Leo energy. How is Mars? How is my will? Am I living my authenticness? Because that's a big theme next year. And then I move to how do I nurture that? How do I pivot? Keep myself, but still be part of this collective. And
Great
we're,
word,
yeah,
Kitty. I just want to say, like, the preview word is the perfect word for like, what are we
yeah.
feeling right now? It's like a preview before we boogie into
It
2020.
really, it really is. And, no mistakes in the stars. This isn't. astronomically interesting time where the end of all of these really long cycles, 164 years, 84 years, um, what are the other ones? 20 years, 16 years
Yeah.
are all coming kind of like Pluto, 246 years, coming to an end and starting anew. Two completely a new spiral that were both Saturn and our Neptune energy. New cycle with spirit, a new cycle with our structures, potential, and our taskmasters
Interesting.
as well. So I think this is a great preview because the end of the day comes, my 63rd year taught me I have no idea why anybody does anything. None,
Isn't that
zero.
true?
It's a good way,
And
it's a good way to walk through life.
yeah, really understanding it. So the only thing I do have is my own Mars, my own alignment with then why you here. Since I can't really figure out why you're doing what you're doing at all, I pretty much have removed. Well, I think they're doing that because no, I have no idea why they're doing it.
Kitty, I have a question for you, if I may, just to
Sure.
give the audience something to chew on. If their Mars is in a water sign, yours Cancer, or a fire sign, mine Leo. Jeanette, do you know where your
I don't
Mars
know. I'm
is?
gonna look at mine here, but
Okay.
carry on. I'll see what
But
mine.
Kitty, I would love to hear the word choice that you would gift your Mars in Cancer because I don't have a good flavoring for that. Like I do when I see it in the wholeness of a chart, but can you just talk like just
Well,
throw
and
a
it's also
words at it?
happens, sure, it also happens to be in the seventh house,
Mm,
where Mars isn't particularly happy either,
mm.
um, along with my Black Lilith, my free will. So
Rock and
the word
roll.
I use for Mars in Cancer is pivot. It's
Mm,
always in a pivot. It's always trying to weigh out my will um, with what else is going on. And so it's kind of in and out of a doorway. It's always making a choice, like pivoting, like, let me look at this way and this way. So, um,
what other words would you use for it?
uh, circumstantial,
Oh,
circumstance.
interesting. I
Yeah.
find it usually when I'm doing a reading, and this is why I wanted to ask you because you live it every day, but I find it's typically quite artistic. Like I find people with Mars in Cancer to usually have a bit of an artistic flair. Would you say this is accurate? I mean, it's just been
Yeah,
my experience.
I would more than artistic, I'd call it creative. That's the pivot.
Good word choice. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like, okay, let me think of all of the pieces. How can I put this together to align with me and still nurture what the situation is?
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Mars archetype struggles in Cancer.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I
Yes.
wanted you to speak to it directly because I don't have a good feeling for it because it's not my lived experience. So mine is
Mm.
fire, it's in Leo. And to me, it's very instinctual, it's very movement oriented, it's very uh, creative for sure. I am driven by creativity and like where functionality and fashion meet. It always has to have a sort of a purpose and a beauty to it. Um, and very sporty for sure. Um, and fun. Like it's to me, it's a bit like how do I move through the world forcefully fun, seeking fun, chasing fun, having fun, creating fun, you know? So
Right.
those are some of the words that I would use for Mars in a fire sign. And then just in Leo, it is about creative self-expression and creativity um and I would say part of it is a little bit of my love of children, even though I don't have any, but you can always find me at the kids' table, you know?
Hmm.
Anyways,
Yeah,
Jeanette, did
definitely.
you find yours?
Yeah, so I mean, let's touch on the rest of them anyways, right?
Okay,
So
sure.
mine
Yeah.
mine is in Libra. So what is that for like an air sign if Mars is in an air sign?
Well, in Libra, it's seeking balance, right? So seeking harmony. Don't love conflict, right? So Mars in Libra would really be, I would say, you go with the flow, go with the flow, go with the flow till the hatchet drops, and then
Yeah.
everyone's like, "Whoa, where'd that come from?" Because
Till
then
you
all of a
So
realize,
sudden you
true.
have an opinion about something, and we're going to hear about it. But then it's easily going to dissipate, and you'll come back to center quicker than others, maybe, or something.
Yeah.
But does that resonate?
Yeah.
Mars is aligned with justice in Libra.
Yeah,
What is
Yeah.
just, what
yeah.
is fair, what is balanced.
Yeah.
Interesting because what the other word that came to me for Cancer is discernment. Mars is always aligning our will And in Cancer, it doesn't quite know what the will is. It's trying to like incorporate a lot of things. That's why it's not very happy. Mars isn't tremendously happy in Libra either,
No.
because Mars tends to be the warrior archetype, which doesn't mean it wants to be at war, but it wants justice through a fight. And the Libra part is very equal to that Cancer part of, now, wait a minute, just a minute.
Hmm.
And though I would say a characteristic of when you're done in Libra.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
it.
Yeah.
that's very true. Very
Hmm.
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
So then what about for an earth sign if someone has their Mars in an earth sign?
I would say very driven by um, doing, right? An earth sign is solid, stable, grounded, and Mars in an earth sign is very driven for, oh, what's the word I'm thinking about? Like forward motion, like project management type stuff. Like if you have Mars in an earth sign, I usually talk about it actually when I see it for grief and loss. As a death doula, when I talk about these topics, because Mars in an earth sign wants a plan. There's no
Mhm.
plan with grief and loss. You're just in it till you win it, you know? And that's just talking very loosely about a topic I'm super passionate about. So I don't mean to be glib about that. But so when I see Mars in an earth sign, when I'm dealing with like a grief or a loss storyline, I always want to guide the conversation towards, and grief doesn't have a plan, and that's going to be very uncomfortable. So it wants a plan. It does well with a plan. These are the project managers in our life. These are the people that build bridges and buildings and
These are the people that see the pattern, whether it's the larger pattern, the home pattern, the smaller pattern. And that makes perfect sense to me with grief because there is no pattern. And the
no,
thing about Mars and Earth is it wants to follow the pattern. It wants the way to go. It can align its will to move a mountain with a plan to move the mountain.
yeah,
It
Right.
doesn't want the mountain dropped in front of it.
yeah.
So
Interesting.
it's, each of them has a challenge. And of course, Mars with the air sign is what do air and fire do?
Right.
What does fire do with the earth? It scorches it, but it doesn't immobilize it. And in emotion, it either boils the water or it goes out. So, it's kind of
Interesting.
Mars is our kickoff of everything. It
Yeah.
is the ultimate spark that starts us all. So,
And one other comment I want to make, and
yeah.
which is why I giggled when you were saying every every sign has its challenges. It made me giggle right away because in the grief and loss storyline that I've been living in the last year with my mom and her ultimate death about a month ago is a lot of anger. So Mars in a fire sign, you can
Right.
sit in anger. I think people sometimes are often concerned about my anger, but I just always remind them like it's just a passionate feeling and it comes out and it dissipates quickly too, ish. But I just want to bring that into the conversation of grief and loss too, because sometimes my sadness often looks like anger or like frustration at the system of the hospital systems or the, like the things I had to advocate for instance. And so I just want to drop that in there because it made me giggle.
Mhm.
That he
Yeah,
said
no, it does.
it
They
has
each
its
have
challenges, and
their
I'm like,
challenges.
oh boy, do I know that?
And
Yeah.
it's, you know what? That's a great point because we're coming into this year. This is why this is a preview for us.
Yeah.
Take a look at how you deal and become very comfortable with it because there's a lot of asking coming in this kind of evolutionary energy that is stepping forth. And this is an archetype. This is the archetype of the warrior energy that is stepping forth. That
Yeah.
and not warrior and I've got to destroy, but warrior and I'm here. I am that I am, and that is enough. And how am I going to live my life that way with throughout some of this energy that's
And also,
stepping forward?
just back to the grief and loss, just because we're sort of,
Mhm.
we've been in a sea of it for, a few years, and there is a lot of like agitation, as we talked about Ginette in that one podcast. I don't remember when that was, but agitation, and just a reminder that emotions are just information. So when people, let's say, are critical of my anger, let's say in my direct family, to me, I'm just paying attention to myself and it's just information. Like, what am I exactly angry about and what do I need to do to ease this pain? Because for me, ultimately, my anger is just a connection to my pain. And I just want people to be aware of that instead of being afraid of it, because also societally, in our patriarchal world, we don't really love supporting women in anger. That's really not a like a thing. And just like how we don't really love supporting men in their water, their tears and their emotions. So I just want to say to all the women out there that have a lot of fire in their charts, and there's a lot of us, to not be
Mhm.
afraid of the anger and to just be aware of it. What's the information it's bringing you? And for
Hmm.
anybody, what are the emotions trying to get my attention for? Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah,
Yeah, it makes
absolutely.
Specifically for anger in women because it's a thing that's not
Yes.
really celebrated.
well,
Yes.
and Mars is associated with anger, guys. It
Yeah.
focus, anger.
Mhm.
That's how we process it. Whether we process it around justice, whether we process it around pivoting, figuring it out, or that earth of I need a plan, damn it.
Mm,
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
it's
mm.
still anger in there. So
Yeah. So now this is just my question. And again, I definitely am not near your wealth of astrology wisdom. Would it be accurate to say that Mars, as we're in Mars right now, and it's giving us this kind of like entry into 2025,
Mm.
is Mars representing more the individual, and then the next series of signs and planets moving are more the collective?
Great question. Yeah, I would say the reason we would like to talk about Mars just introducing 2025 is because it's definitely a personal vibe. And if you know how to find your Mars in your chart, you can go look. And if you don't, you can always get a reading or just Google, there's ways of finding out that information, but it's absolutely a personal transit right now. And it is affecting everybody personally, whether you like it or not. And it's just like a Mercury, right? Like again, just the
Mhm.
revisit, rethink, reevaluate. Mm-mm-mm. And then we're going to blast into 2025 where there's a lot more, not a lot more collective energy, just where the conversation will flow to the collective, which,
Mhm.
and
there's always personal stuff going on. But yes, this big collective energy that we're moving into.
and this last big Mars retrograde was in Gemini, was all about how am I going to experience something? How am I holding the duality of polarity and dealing with it? And one of the other big transitions is into Gemini. So we're getting a lot of this energy that is, I think this is exactly why personally we're aligning ourselves as we come into these bigger themes that are shifting and
Mhm.
w which boats are we going to be on? What are we going to be navigating? Which airport am I coming into? There's a lot of those bigger collective themes that are stepping forth, and you're going to need to know where is my alignment? Where's my anger? Where's my passion? Where's my justice? Where is this stepping
Yeah.
forth for me and being very comfortable? I think this will be a year of really different boundaries for people. And I
Yeah.
don't even quite know what that means yet. They just keep talking about it. And I'm like, okie dokie. So I think knowing your own will and your own understanding is very important.
Well, and then back to like an astrology reading or any kind of reading, tarot, numerology, whatever your language is. Why? Well, to understand yourself, to deeply
Mhm.
understand yourself. How am I driven? How am I motivated? What do I value in it? It just becomes very clear when you see it in a way that is like instead of sitting on your couch, thinking about yourself and what did you do today that was so silly or what motivated me to do that or say that or act that way. That's another reason to get a reading or any kind of reading, like whether it's astrology, like I said, or any
Yeah.
you any
Absolutely.
avenue. Yeah.
So, so then, if everybody listening, when you have a chance to check in on where your Mars is in your chart, then as we bring that into the new year, into 2025, what are the main planets that are doing their things? Like, what is the first planet that we're gonna be introduced to in this new energy?
Well, the first thing is going to be the nodal axis shift. We're going to move from our Libra Aries energy, here we go, Aries again, to Pisces Virgo, Pisces North Node, which is all about spirit. And spirit happens to be the next big planet that is shifting, the planet of spirit, Neptune, at the end of March. So, first, we're going to change our whole way our souls are looking at their growth. We started something, and now we're moving to um, the energy of flow and spirit and imagination and dreams in this nodal axis.
Interesting.
Um, And
And the
then
north node being where we're going,
going and
south
we're
node being where we're trying to let go of the past. So just to interrupt you there, Katie, but
right.
you're
No,
carry
no,
on. You're saying it
please
nicely.
interrupt. So, and now, interesting enough, I have the same axis, but it's going to be reversed. Um, we are moving more towards the dreams, imagination, spirit. What is the possibility, the bigger opening of flow, kind of away from the patterns we know and the Virgo energy of the prediction and the patterns. It's also solution generating. And the thing about an axis is the golden shadow is to use what is helpful with one as we move towards the other and letting go of the things that limit us. So an example of that was we're sitting here with this Libra, where we're really working on letting go of beliefs that we thought were bringing us balance that weren't, holding on to the ones that are truly us while we start anew on how we step forward with that Aries energy. So that's really our first thing that we deal with is a nodal axis. Well, we have Mars that goes into on the 6th also into Cancer in January. In that retrograde, we have the nodal axis that steps forward. And the first big shift is Neptune on the 30th, 31st of March, wherever you are. It last time it was in this sign, it was 1861.
Interesting.
So that,
So
you
it
know,
doesn't start with like a bang right in January in a sense, right? Like it we're kind of rolling into it already, right? Like
Yeah,
we're
with
like
Mars.
snowballing into it.
with
Yeah,
Mars,
with
yeah.
a Mercury and a Mars retrograde,
Yeah,
which is like a nice chill way because I think
Yeah,
last year we came in with a bang, if I'm not mistaken, but my
we
years
did.
blur. But like that's what's so nice about the retrogrades. Everybody always freaks out about the retrogrades, but I'm like, sweet, I'm just like cozying down for the winter. And so, yeah, I would say it's a gentle vibe if you choose to see it that way. It's hard.
Mhm.
Retrogrades can bring our attention to things that we don't really want to look at.
Well, and there are
The
quite a
gifts live
few.
there.
Yeah. There are quite a
Pardon?
few ages entering. There is an there's all these ages in this first 6 months coming to an end. Some are like hundreds of thousand years. There's a huge shift in this little 6 month window we got going in
really.
2025. So I think that I'm right with you, Shannon. Let's just because it's gonna pick up speed from there. I mean, Spirit at the end of March starts a whole new 165-year cycle.
Wow, of like spiritual awakening maybe on high,
Yeah,
right?
and
Would that be accurate to kind of put it that way?
yeah, because when you're talking about Neptune and Aries, it's the intangible, imaginative visions, greater whole. Meanwhile, we got the visions that we're working on in um, our Pluto that is in Aquarius energy. Um, I think we have to go back almost to the 1200s, the last time they were together. The
Interesting.
Pluto and Aquarius and Spirit starting this. And this is a warrior kind of willpower, dynamic action, collective impulses that we're going to be working on for a greater good. Fighting for spiritual causes. This is the kind of energy we're stepping into in this spiral, you know?
Yeah, and Neptune doesn't love being in Aries, I would say.
No.
So it's it's going to be interesting. Um it can be like if you think of spirituality with Neptune and Aries, the warrior, that can look like a lot of strong religious undertones, right? Like
Or being
religion.
challenged, those strong religious
Yeah,
undertones
yeah,
being
yeah.
challenged.
Which, you know,
Is
You
this
know how that goes. Yeah.
is this where some of the ET stuff comes in? Because I keep being told that there's going to be much more ET cosmic communication.
I feel
Well,
like that's more Uranus moving into Gemini, but we can get to that in a minute.
I think
Oh, okay.
I think it's a little bit of it. And one of the
Okay.
things that I've become aware of is not only are they coming in, but there's groups leaving. I don't know what that's about. All of a sudden one day I hear, well, there are also entities leaving. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I hadn't really thought of that.
Yeah.
It's not all coming here, but there's something that's happening. This is this is a collective impulse to start something, to see it differently, to be different with spirit, something is starting in personal strength because it's the warrior archetype. How do
Interesting.
I stand? So you're right, it's not real happy in Aries, and it's moving forward, a new cycle with spirit. And there are going to be people digging in going, I mean, we already hear people making fun of the woke. Like that's a bad thing. That cracks
Yeah,
me up. Oh yeah, they're woke. That's a bad thing. Okay. So on we move in that conversation.
right.
So
So after then, sorry, Neptune moving end of March, you said, right? What's
mhm.
the next planet that's going to be dancing around?
Saturn also um moving into Aries. Got a lot of Aries stepping
Wow,
forward.
a
Yeah.
lot of fire.
In May 25th.
So
It's my
sad.
birthday.
Ah, that's awesome.
That's
Auspicious.
awesome.
Auspicious.
And the last
Yeah.
time we were dealing with this was the 1999. Remember what was going to happen when it turned
Yeah.
2000 and all of that kind of energy? Well, that's the last time we were dealing with this energy.
Interesting.
So,
Wow.
So
and
Saturn's
Saturn's one of our
connecting.
bridge planets. So it's taking our daily energy and it's what we walk across to those bigger themes.
Okay.
So
Interesting. What were
what
you
do you
going to
think
say
about
about that?
Saturn and Aries,
Oh, I was just going to say
Shannon?
Saturn is all about our foundations and it's hanging out with Neptune in Aries, which is just anybody's guess. Like, it
Yeah,
just makes me giggle. It's just gonna, I don't
It's
know.
it's kind of contrary in its understanding of limitations, responsibility, groundedness, along with new dreaming and starting new things and it's relating to kind of this bridge, this how are we going to take our leadership, take our foundations, take our awareness, our dreams, include spirit and build whatever this energy is. So
So
fascinating time.
is it like basically playing with fire? If you know how to play with fire, it can be really fun and illuminating and really cool, and you can put on a fire dance show. Versus if you don't know how to do it, you're gonna play with fire and you're gonna get super burned. So would it make sense that like if you take the Mars energy we're in right now and you really get to know self, by the time you get to the Aries energy, then you'd be able to better play with that fire? Or am I just creating a totally
No,
random story?
I actually, that's why I said it's a preview for us. This is a tool that we're internally working with, that when this external stuff starts to happen, we can kind of go, oh, wait a minute. Now I know that, like Shannon said, I'm going to get angry. There are going to be people here who are going to not be able to deal with my anger. So those aren't the people I'm going to hang out with right now. I don't need that because I've already trying to deal with this. So I actually think it will be a tool. For me, it will be learning when not to pivot. I don't have to pivot. It doesn't all have to be okay. I can basically tell somebody to go do something, and there's a boundary piece when you are a Cancer, Mars person that you're trying to figure out. So yeah, I think it's a lot of beginnings, a lot of endings. It's the end. It's a 9 transformation year. So numerology wise, it's all about the end of the cycle. And it's the year of the snake.
Interesting.
Just
So
to just to go back to your question, Jeanette, I think Mars is more about how are you going to personally react. To me, it's a reactivity word.
mhm.
Okay.
How are you personally going to be in that bigger storyline, and what are you going to do with your reactions? Because Mars is just instinctual. It wants to do, it wants to move, it wants to be. And so to me, it's more of understanding how you move through the world so that when you are hit with these bigger storylines coming down, not just in 2025, but also into 2026, it just gives you a better understanding again of self and how you react and how could you react better. And if you react poorly, how can you navigate that to get back to center? So to me, it's just for awareness so that when we go into these more dynamic environments, for good or for bad, the dynamic word I use, you are aware. when to step out and get grounded, and how to best use that Mars energy for the collective. That's what it
Yeah,
speaks to me.
it is. It's a tool, and we're getting a little fine tuning of paying attention to our tool.
Yeah.
I
So,
think,
yeah, okay. So we have Neptune moving, we have Saturn moving. What's the next planet that's moving?
Uranus into Gemini, isn't it?
Jupiter first to Cancer.
Oh, yeah, right.
Okay.
Jupiter.
Jupiter. So I mean, we're going March, May, June, July. And Jupiter and Uranus are really close in their movement. Jupiter is 6/10/2025, and it's moving. It's our only planet that is moving into a feminine sign from and it will retrograde back though. Um, it's moving into Cancer, and Jupiter likes Cancer. It is exalted in Cancer. So that's kind of to me for me, as a, Sagittarius rising, loves Jupiter, real comfortable with it. That's kind of my big yay. But the themes are the same. It's so interesting because the themes are the same about your lining up with who you are, and um, it's about generous compassion, cohesion, growth, understanding, helpful opportunities. So, with all of these new things, we now have Jupiter that steps forth to expand the possibilities. So, again, going back to what Shannon said about Mars, knowing yourself when this energy starts allows me to make those choices versus the perhaps activation I may be feeling with some of the other things that feel more oppressive, more not understanding, beyond. So that's the beginning of June, June 10th.
What do
Again,
you,
June 9th if you're in the West. So you guys
yeah,
will be the 9th, I'll be the 10th.
right.
So a
What do you
lot of
have
that this
to,
year, by the way.
yeah, what do you have to add to that, Shannon, with Jupiter?
I love Jupiter too because Jupiter sits on my rising sign. So I have a really great
Yes.
friendship with Jupiter. Um, it expands everything it touches. So Jupiter in Cancer says to me, really looking at how do you take care of yourself and what are you doing to take care of yourself? And if you're not taking care of yourself, how can you change that? Jupiter also brings in perspectives and shifts perspectives. So to me, it's just an abundance of nurturing and nourishing energy. Um, and I would say definitely for the collective and also, of course, personally, depending on where it lands in your chart.
Right.
It will help us with a lot of the cancer topics we're dealing with, relationships, families, those
Family.
kinds of things,
Yeah.
stepping forward at that point. And with all this newness, that's fear for many people.
Mm.
And what you align yourself with, it's the unknown, it's the kind of taboo. And
Interesting.
so to me, this is the gift of this other trifecta that's going on, because
Mm.
it's a trifecta that's happening, because again the next one is Uranus, or Uranus, however you want to say
Uranus.
it.
Yeah, let's talk about that one. Because that one, a lot of people kind of shudder when they think of Uranus
I
and
want to
Pluto
say
usually, but
I'm going to bridge Jupiter into the Uranus conversation because when you say family, I want to add um, mostly because I have a very large Aquarian vibe in my chart, so I'm more about the big picture. And I don't have a family of my own as far as like kids, husband, like the traditional family. So for me, the word family, I want to include like communities in that um because I think if anything the pandemic has brought in the last 4 years and certainly coming into the next 2 years, and we don't have to look far to see how are we staying safe, how are we protecting others like more vulnerable populations.
Mhm.
um, and to me, that is the true essence of the word family. So it's not just family of origin, and if you have children and or a husband and or a wife. And
Mhm.
then let's just then move into Uranus. So Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius, and Aquarius energy is all about humanitarianism, all about the collective we, looking out, looking wide, looking big, and certainly not for what we are doing today impactfully, but how is it going to leave others in generations to come. So it's very much forward thinking. It's very much about looking ahead, but it's not about a self-serving energy for self. It's really about the collective we. And so if we take the collective we and we call that family because we are one community, right? We are one with
Mhm.
each other on this planet. I think we're coming to realize more than ever, and one with nature and the destruction of nature, the earth, Mother Earth. So I think Uranus moving into Gemini is fun, exciting. That's Uranus. Those are Uranus words. Um, and Uranus is all about innovation and technology, and Gemini certainly is all about communication. And I mean, AI, duh. So I just find it very exciting, and we will, in 20 years from now, we're like with Pluto in moving into Aquarius. I mean, that's the Pluto cycle I'm speaking of when I say 20 years. I just think it's a lot of Aquarian energy, and I can't help but see that for the betterment of the whole of humanity. And typically there is a lot of hardship before we get to the kumbaya moment of like, is everybody loved? Is everybody cared for? Does everybody have enough food, clean drinking water, et cetera, et cetera? We don't have that right now. It's very evident on our planet and in the news cycles. And what are we going to change it? Because the vast majority of humans on the planet want liberation for all, not just money in the bank, like what we've been taught since we were young. Get a job, save your money, fill the bank account up, buy multiple houses on the backs of, et cetera, et cetera. So I think this time is really exciting. And we're in for a world of hurt before we get to the kumbaya moment of like, oh, and yes, we are all getting to the finish line of liberation for all, true liberation for all, and fairness and equality and justice. That felt like a bit of a
Interesting.
rant.
That's
No, no,
okay. This
no.
is good. We got to roll with it. Absolutely.
I know I absolutely because often when I do charts, I call the fourth house also the soul family, not just the family of origin,
Sense.
not
Yeah.
soul family.
Mhm.
And this is an exciting, it's radical change,
Yeah,
but
it's
these are all
radical.
very much woven together. This
Yeah.
is Saturn asking us to be the best version put forth. What are we responsible for in Aries? Taking a look at it. This is Jupiter expanding that compassion, passionate expansion, understanding of truths, the greater understanding of our soul family. We have Neptune trying to figure out how to start that, incorporating this. And then we have Uranus breaking down limitations, stepping in with the momentum of Gemini, looking at that. We spent a lot of time with Mars and Gemini, that duality. How am I going to experience it? What's my voice going to be? This is the sign of communication. What's my voice, my place, my space in this collective understanding? And so these four planets, which are, and we got to throw obviously Pluto in there too, that's just in its 20-year cycle of the bigger vision, that revolutionary energy. These are all planets working together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Figuring this out, though, is part of our daily energy. How am I approaching this every single day in this collective, the version of me that holds the best version of we, and learning. I know that I'm so passionate about soul family. I have family members recently that I'm like, we're we might have been born from the same genetic material, but we are different human beings with different priorities. And when you align yourself with this voice, I'm not going to be hanging out with you pretending it's okay with me because it's not.
Hmm.
Those marginalized people, this is
Yeah.
about all of us, not, he who gets to the end of life with the best toys wins,
Hmm.
energy. So it's
And
big
Uranus,
shaking.
yeah, and Kitty touched down on it, something I forgot to mention, which is sudden changes. Uranus is all about sudden changes, whereas Pluto is all about a slow burn.
Okay.
Uranus is more about like, how about let's just topple that building, shall we? Have just a little earthquake.
Yeah.
Right.
Boom.
Right.
So Uranus is sudden change, sudden movement. Didn't see that coming. Wow. for the good and the bad, but the collective, I think, like Kitty just said, it's for the betterment of all.
Mhm.
But in moments of time, the hardships in the last handful of years, it doesn't feel like that. Sometimes it's hard to get through the day and witness all the things we have to witness if you pay attention to what's
Yeah.
going on around the world. But it's
Uranus,
sudden change and it's not necessarily bad.
yeah, Uranus is quite the planet. I had Uranus squaring Uranus this month in my transits. Um, and that's when I lost my voice, my name, still dealing with all of those things, you know. And in the States, the platform I'm on is about it can be kicked off pretty
Yes.
quickly. So it's like,
Right.
you know, there's a technological piece of this that I actually think this is just my own prediction. The the technological piece they keep talking to me about is awakening in the human mind and the human heart. That technology is waking up,
Mhm.
not just what's outside of us, a different intelligence. And we're going to be dealing with artificial intelligence. So, what is real? What isn't real? Let's go back to that Mars retrograde, aligning with who we are, our decisions, our tools, understanding how we're going to move forward. That's what Mars is about. How do I move from here?
Right. So that's a really like power-packed spring into summer, right? Like a lot can transform from March until July, did you say? Was it July or June?
But let's just call it the year.
Yeah, it's
The
the year because
year.
then we start going to retrogrades. We're going to be sitting at that 0 and 29th degree on these major planets for quite a long time, resetting the karma, building something anew, you know, realignment, back and forth, just kind of,
Interesting.
pretty
Would
much
you
somebody's always going to be at 0 or 29 the entire freaking year, basically.
Yeah, so again, back to that agitation word and your relationship with discomfort, I think would be a great phrase. Your relationship with comfort and care. So like back to the Cancer energy, how do you take care of yourself? How do you nourish yourself on a bad day? Let's say, let's just take the bad day because it's really easy to nourish ourselves when we're feeling good and peppy and have lots of good energy and a good sleep. But I would say it's going to feel a little bit like driving with the brakes on this
Mhm.
year. I don't think there'll be any much conclusions. I think we're just entering the race, like entering the arena. And the shakedown of what happens in the arena is the year of 2025 going into 2026. And I think 2026 we'll have a better understanding of like what was happening in the arena. Wow.
Okay.
That's just
That's
my
well, that's interesting because Spirit told me that the next 3 years, so 2025, 26, and 27, those 3 full years would be a massive like transformation shift in and of itself, like a little 3 year pocket of something, like a 3 year gift of transformation, and then there's like a new cycle starting in 2028. Does that make sense astrologically?
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of like how you spoke early days. I don't even know when you started getting those messages about the 100 years in 4 years.
Yeah, in
But it's kind
2020.
of like that. It's kind of the same energy of what 2020 brought in. Not the same energy, but I'm just saying the same unknownness of like, wow, there's going to be a kapow and what's happening and what is that going to be? And of course, no one knew, you can't predict something that's like never happened before. So it's in that vein, I think, of the same not knowingness of what does all of this mean in 2025? Don't know. Of course, in
Mm-hmm.
2026, we're going to be able to look back on 2025 and say, wow, that's what that was all about. And then certainly, of course, in 2027, we can look at 2026, same. But yes, it makes sense to me. Like your early days of like, we're living through a very transformative time, like blasting through 100 years in 4 years. In the
Yeah,
early days of you saying that, I mean, everybody was like, what's she talking about?
I know.
Yeah, including you.
Yeah.
What does that mean? I don't know, but look at us now.
Hmm.
Look at us now and the
Right.
veils that have been ripped off.
Yeah.
And the separation that is happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I look at Neptune and Aries as dynamic action energy, willpower. Saturn is all about responsible action, making necessary choices. Jupiter is about nurturing with those choices and stepping forth. And then Uranus about the radical change that all of this is, you know, bringing forth, breaking down our limitations. So they're working together. We won't have the perspective of distance until we've gone through it.
Hmm.
Always, but yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's a bit of an unknown, and so I like that you're getting that same message, Jeanette, in
Hmm.
your pocket of transformation. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so then what's coming up after that? So after we have Uranus moving, what's the next planet? And when does that happen? Because isn't there a series of five or six this year? Or 2025 has five or six planets doing big things?
Well, we've got five started with Pluto up
Mhm.
through
Ah,
Uranus in
okay.
July.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
then we have all the retrogrades that happen in and out of all of that. And those retrogrades are going to be important because they're finishing this other cycle, especially those two Aries one when they go back to their Pisces to, bring that forward. And we have this nodal axis
Yeah, I
of
was gonna say
spirit.
that.
Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
the nodal. Don't forget about the nodal axis shift. That's huge. So that
Yeah.
is six right there.
And the nodal axis, I see. Okay. It kind of is like what carries us through the year. Like it would be like the ocean, and then the other planets doing their thing is happening on the surface, would you say?
It's
You
about our
correct me if I'm
soul's
wrong.
work.
Yeah.
Our nodal axis is about the soul's work, what we're moving towards, what we're trying to work with, and that energy. We all have our own nodal axis. And so whatever the nodal axis is in is bringing forth another level for our own soul's work. And it's
Interesting.
kind of an overarching energy that we're trying to move towards spirit. Once we start, we're trying to move, and spirit's in a new cycle. So, what is that going to look like? How are we going to bridge what we understand or don't understand? I would tell you what I learned the most in November is how much I don't quite understand that I thought was clearer than, wonder what that means. So,
Hmm. I definitely learned that too, actually. That same, like, wow, I realize how much I don't know yet again. Not that I don't ever believe we figure it all out. Like, I don't think that's possible. I think we're always growing, but there's moments where we start to feel comfortable in what we know. And then this summer for me was a time where it was like yanked out from under me and I didn't know what was, or, like there's so much that didn't make sense to me at the time. But what I always found interesting is there was always this undercurrent, though, that was just like bold and big within me. That was like, no, you do know, you just can't define it yet. Right? It was just this, it was a transformation piece, right? Like a phoenix. The phoenix is, being burnt down into ash, only then to rise again. And in that moment, when it's just the ash, it doesn't realize maybe yet it's going to rise again, right? So there was
Mhm.
this neat transformation energy that I can really understand with what you were saying before.
And I
I
think
think
like Jeanette, we talked about the other day with the grief podcast, which I'm reading a book called Grief is for People, and there was a sentence or a quote in there, and I think it sums up exactly what we're talking about. And it says, "None of us is the same person we were an hour ago." And
Hmm.
I just think that's so relevant because of the change that we're moving through, certainly in the last 4 years, certainly in the next, let's just call it 3 year pocket. We can be hard on ourselves for not knowing that thing, or we can just embrace, like, well, now I know it. I didn't know it an hour ago, and I certainly didn't know it last year, but now I can embrace the change. I can go educate myself more. I can talk with other communities that have been doing this more than I have been. So I think when I read that sentence the first time, for me, it was about my journey with my mom. And I've always felt like so naive every day in the cycle of advocacy in helping someone die. And it struck me as a negative thing. Like, I wish I wasn't so naive that last hour. And in life, I think it's the same. Like, we wish we knew what we knew, like in the next hour, the hour ago, but it's just not how we're designed, right? We're just designed to keep learning through the tough experiences and the hard conversations and the hard situations. And then we get to this place, and then there's more learning and more growing, and we're never the same. Like, to me, I don't know, I just found that quote so beautiful. I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, I agree. I feel that for sure. I think that's the theme in these transformations too, is like allowing that radical discovery of self.
Yeah.
And in a sense that we're not discovering from the very bottom pit, we're actually farther along than we think, but it's having like fresh eyes on that discovery.
Yeah, and not being embarrassed or ashamed or all those easy words and easy feelings that we go to as little critical humans that we are in our little meat suits, you know? And just like you say, just I don't know, to me it was just like ripping off that quit being ashamed, quit feeling sad about it. Um just know that there's growth in it and you just
Yeah.
grew. And
Yeah.
yeah.
So, question, are there any standout things happening in the fall of 2025? Is that where some of the retrogrades are? Or
Oh,
is,
yeah.
yeah, so fall is kind of like retrograde season in a sense?
And
Why do you
there's
ask, Jeanette? I feel like you have some insider
No,
information.
I actually don't. No, I wish I did.
there's some big conjunctions happening too across even when these planets are changing in the fall, and some of the eclipses are going to be for that reason much bigger eclipses than they've
Right.
been before.
Eclipse
We're
season.
we're right now in a very interesting, we're between two quote unquote black moons, new moons that have happened. And black moons are the dark side of blue moons, just wisdom. And, Shannon, a book I read this year that had a line for me was Mary Magdalene Revealed. And she talks about ignorance in a different way than I've ever heard ignorance. And it's just that what we don't know is what we don't know. And when we embrace that, rather than fighting it and wishing it away, it continually allows that ignorance becomes wisdom. But
Yeah.
ignorance is a gift in itself because it's what pushes us forward. And that was the first time I really didn't have some other thing around
Like
what
a
I don't
negative
know.
view. Hmm.
Yeah. So,
That's interesting.
and so in the fall, I haven't looked at as much because there's so much going on in between. The retrogrades will be stepping forth, and I do know there's a really big eclipse that happens in
Oh,
the
okay.
fall of next year. And
Well, then I think it would probably be a really good idea for us to touch base again in the summer. And then we can, maybe take stock of some of the things that have unfolded, unpack them a little bit, and then see how they could play into the eclipses or the retrogrades in the fall. And then we could do
yeah, I'll be
another
curious to know
podcast
what my
then.
name is then.
Yeah, right.
So
Yeah, no,
um,
that sounds like a great idea,
I
Jeanette.
think it
Yeah.
does.
So,
I I so
oh,
enjoy
sorry.
this, ladies, very much.
It's
Yeah.
so fun. So, any closing statements then from either of you, like either a mantra or a thought of how to take on the year, or anything that comes to mind before we close it up today?
The thing that pops into my head just as you offer that is radical self-responsibility. So again, back to Mars, how do you move through the world? What's your instincts? How do you react? And then to take that and be very aware and awake is the word that comes to mind, but just be aware of how you then go out into the collective and use that. So I don't know why that jumps out, radical self-responsibility.
I get that from Spirit too. Actually,
Oh,
that's
wow.
that's one of the
Yeah.
topics for 2025 for sure.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we get with this shift in planets. What is your responsibility? What are you going to do? How are you going to deal with this dynamic? Um, Funny you should say radical, because my words for next year are radical acceptance.
Yeah.
Um, Acceptance. I am that I am, and that is enough. And continuing to come back to in my place, in my space, in the moment I am. What is the decision that aligns with who I am, what I'm being called to do? Um, and my soul family is my most important family. I am
Mhm.
very aware of that, which for me will mean there are some things that I just won't be participating in, and
Right.
others that I will search for people who are marginalized. So,
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Amazing. Thank you both so much for this. There's so much in this episode. So again, for those of you listening, you're really going to want to bookmark this episode and come back as these planets start shifting in 2025. Have a listen again and see how you can unpack more of the pieces and be just like really conscious and aware of your spot, your position that you take up on the planet and your why as you move through it. So I want to thank you both so much again for coming. I will have their information in the description box below for bookings, for readings, birth chart readings, and all of that. So thank you all so much for coming,
Thanks for
and
having me. It's
we'll do
always so
this
fun.
again. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and I will see you next week.